Mandatory? Hi, this is Ali with 10 Points to Ponder. Today I want to talk about a topic that has been in the news that really should be a great concern to everyone as far as the erosion of our freedoms. One of the things that's being suppressed right now in the news is what happened in France on Bastille Day. People of France took it to the streets and went ballistic because their president, Emmanuel Macron, is starting to impose a vaccine mandate and vaccine passport system that essentially says you can't go to grocery stores, you can't go to a cafe, you can't go and do anything. You can't participate in any public activity without showing your vaccine card. And so people in France were out in mass chanting, Liberté! Liberté! That's my best French accent for you. But they're chanting and screaming that they want their liberty because this is the erosion of freedom. If I need a passport to prove that I've gotten a shot in my arm of whatever the government tells me is in there in order to do anything, then the next step is taking more and more of my freedoms. Biden has ramped up his rhetoric, and now he's saying that the pandemic is a pandemic of unvaccinated Americans. And so he's probably starting to lay the groundwork for some sort of vaccine passport system as well. And furthermore, in the news, we saw that the NFL is also thinking about mandating vaccines. So today on 10 Points to Ponder, I want to talk about 10 reasons why people are not getting the vaccine and don't want to get the vaccine. Point one. Simple enough. This is America. It's America, Jack. As I forgot what movie the guy would always say that. We have freedom of choice here. We have freedom whether or not to get this mandated vaccine for this disease that has a very high survivability rate, especially for young people. Point two. What is not being talked about is COVID antibodies. We continue to focus on the vaccine as the way to get antibodies, and yet we know if this disease is as highly transmissible as they say it is, then most people have probably had it and have just been maybe asymptomatic and may already have antibodies. And so if I already have antibodies or I already had COVID, why would I get the vaccine? Case in point, I had COVID. I had COVID around, I think it was November of 2020. And it was not the most pleasant thing, but I got through it. In fact, this week I just recovered from a cold. And this cold that I had was much worse than when I had COVID. Point three, people don't want the vaccine because they're young and healthy. There have been advances already in the treatment of COVID. The reason for some of the deaths in COVID was because doctors did not know how to properly treat it, and we created a panic in which people immediately placed those with COVID on a ventilator, a very invasive ventilator system that now we're finding that they could have just put people on their stomachs and prone them out so that they could breathe better. That's one treatment that was come up with. And we have a lot more therapeutics. So why would I, if there's more treatment and I'm young and healthy, go and get a vaccine for something that I'm very likely to survive? We have so many diseases out here that we just basically roll the dice. We pray and hope we don't get. Point 4, older people who are at highest risk of death, which is the most important thing about COVID, have been vaccinated at 87%. In fact, of the almost 600,000 deaths from COVID, I believe that over the age of 65 and above, I think 400,000 or 500,000 of them ended up being over the age of 65. It was very low prevalence of death in those who were under 65. Point 5. This is an interesting point when you juxtapose things and see the irony of it. Point 5 is voter ID. How is it that we have this big push to call asking for an ID when you go to the polling place as some sort of racist idea harkening back to Jim Crow, and yet you're going to ask people to provide their protected health information in order to access services, or in this case, you're going to blame them for not being vaccinated? It's just a very interesting irony that we want an ID for people to be vaccinated, but we don't care who votes in our elections that actually tip the scales of power. Point 6. If COVID was that important, then last summer would not have happened. We had people out in the streets en masse last summer. Those were super spreader events. People out protesting and throwing bricks and destroying stuff and rallying and tearing down our country because they just wanted to, they were useful idiots to try to get rid of Trump. So we had all of that happen last summer, and here we didn't hear any news of ongoing COVID outbreaks, and none of those were attributed to those people. And yet now we're trying to blame people who haven't had vaccines, when if you really compare the death rate from COVID, you would know that the highest rates of death were in some of the most liberal areas and jurisdictions. New Jersey, New York, top the list of COVID deaths. Point 7. The cost and benefits. Why, if I know I'm going to survive this disease, would I introduce something in me that possibly could give myself health complications, especially if I am a young man, like teenage boy, with some of the data that's coming out about heart problems that these youths might end up having from the COVID vaccine? Why would I introduce that into my system when I know that if I got it, I might not even get sick? I might actually be asymptomatic and just let COVID run its course. So high cost, very low benefit, depending on your age. Next thing, point 8. There have been lies throughout this whole COVID pandemic. We know it was manufactured. It's starting to come out that it was in a Wuhan lab. The same thing that Fauci tried to say wasn't the case. We know that it was gain of function. The idea being that a animal virus could gain the function of being transmissible in humans if they did certain things to it and made modifications to it. We know that we've heard lies about whether masks work or not. We were told not to wear them. Now we're told that they're mandatory. Now they reverse the mask mandate for people who are vaccinated. And want people who haven't been vaccinated to continue to wear masks. And yet, if you are vaccinated, then you're protected from COVID. So what's it to you if the person that is not vaccinated is wearing a mask or not, correct? So even that makes little logical sense. Point 9. People don't get it because they mistrust the government. This entire year, especially when you talk in terms of race, the big line has been that our country, America, is evil. It's evil towards black people. There's a 1619 project, and since 1619, whites have been oppressing black people, and they've been doing all sorts of nefarious deeds towards them, and you cannot trust the U.S. government because it's systemically racist. So you say that in one breath, and then you say, hey, black people, go get the vaccine. It's 100% safe. So no wonder that black people aren't getting the vaccine when they have been told not to trust this government because it's systemically racist. How does that work together? And point 10, this vaccine is still experimental. So would you put yourself under an experimental procedure? It hasn't been approved by the FDA. It's an experimental procedure, and so a lot of people are saying, no way, I'm not going to be your guinea pig. Those are at least 10 reasons. I could think of a few more reasons for sure why people aren't getting vaccines. Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. My name is Ali Schwaga, and this has been 10 Points to Ponder.